It's another Friday, so it means it's time to answer some questions from the mailbag next on Locked On Royals.
You are Locked On Royals, your daily Kansas City Royals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for tuning in to another edition of Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. As always, I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. You also can check us out on wherever you get your podcasts. That can be Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Google Podcast. We're on Odyssey, and we're on YouTube. Just be sure to hit that follow button and subscribe. If you are a first-time listener and you want to know a little bit more about me and this show, well, I am based here in Kansas City. I work at Sports Radio 810 WHB, do some hosting, co-hosting, and some producing on a day-to-day in the sports world. But also when you come to this podcast, when you click on this link, you are going to be getting 30 straight minutes of Royals baseball. And today's show is brought to you by Booking.com. Booking. The right way, the right stay can make you a fan of any city, even your rivals. Check out Booking.com for your stay today. And on days like today, with it being a Mailbag Friday, you can always send your questions and your comments to my Twitter handle, or you can send them to YouTube. I'll try my best to get to every single question. And we should have plenty of time today to go in depth for pretty much all the questions that we have, starting with the one we got from Bobbert Witt. What two players have never spoke to each other in the clubhouse? Michael Garcia 100% has never heard of Chris Stratton. Well, I will say from a standpoint of there's cliques. I don't want to even say cliques, but there are groups in the clubhouse. Guys are closer with different players. They, are friends outside of the stadium. I think that, certainly guys are going to have their best friends on their team and guys maybe they're not as close with, but that is a good one of who do you think has never spoken to the other? Maybe it come down to which lockers are far apart from each other. I know there's a couple of bullpen arms that are like on the far right side of the clubhouse, and the opposite side is where Salvador Perez and Freddie Fermin are. But again, catchers have to know their bullpen guys. But I do love the question. I have always wondered that with over the course of 162 games, how often are you speaking to everybody? Because, as much as you like to say, you go to the ballpark every single day, you mingle with everybody. It's not really the case. Sometimes you don't talk to certain guys on the team, but also teams that are fractured and don't have good relationships in the clubhouse. That may happen more often than you think. Next question we have here comes from Dylan. If the season ends and we have a winning record, but no postseason spot, will you be happy with the season considering how bad we were last year? I think that's one of the things you do have to keep into perspective, but also acknowledge that, blowing an opportunity to get into the playoffs is not going to be championed or made an excuse for when it's all said and done. I know that if this team falls short in September, there are going to be fans that are upset because you had at one point a pretty cushy lead in the wild card race. You at one point were in first place in the American League Central. You had hot months. You had survived a bad stretch. And I think the tough part is there's no guarantee the Royals have as good of a season next year or even better than that. You'd like to think it, but it's never that case. It's never that case where you can accurately assess a team and what they're going to look like the following year or 2 years down the road, or even 3 years down the road. Sometimes you can, if you've got a loaded farm system, you have elite level talent, the big league level. That's something we don't see in Kansas City. And I think a perfect example is after they won the World Series, they never had a winning record again. They haven't had a winning record since 2015. I don't think anybody would have predicted what happened in 16, what happened in 17. So it's about capitalizing on good starts, strong months. And I think I'll be one of those people. If they fall a game or two short, I'm not going to be overly disappointed because that's one of the biggest jumps we've ever seen from a major league team, especially after losing 106 games. But it will sting a little bit if they fall short. And right now they are on the outside looking in, still plenty of games to go to change that. But, I think you do have to put it in perspective and go, this team was not expected to have that big of a turnaround. And they played in one of the toughest divisions this year, at least win-loss wise. Cleveland has been really good. Minnesota has been really good. And the American League is stacked right? The last wild card team right now is almost 10 games over 500. That's just not the case on the National League side. But I would be able to put it in perspective and still count the season as a success because that would be an entire year of competitive baseball in Kansas City. Next question comes from Casey Superiority. Has anyone ever seen Jack and Nick Lofton in a room together? I can't be the only one who sees it. Also, feeling very confident about our matchup tonight with Reagan's on the Hill versus Kyle Freeland. Can you give me any reasons not to throw my whole bankroll on the Royals money line tonight? I would say the only reason you wouldn't have to put your money down on that is that Coors Field can be weird. You would like to think a pitching matchup that features Cole Reagans against a guy whose ERA is north of 7. It should be a domination. You just never know there. I mean, if Cole Reagans doesn't have his best stuff, the ball could be flying out of the yard tonight and off of guys that you may have never heard before. I mean, the Rockies are not a good baseball team. I don't think they're going to be able to contain the Royals offense. But coming off last night in which they scored 8 runs, maybe it's a good time for this offense really to kick it into gear against some bad pitching. And they'll have 2 of their aces on the bump in Cole Reagans and Seth Lugo. So I'm not going to tell you how to put your money down, but this does feel like a very favorable spot for the Royals. Also, I never heard the Nick Lofton comparison before. Maybe I'll have to ask Nick Lofton about it next time I see him if he sees any similarities as well. Next one comes from Alex. Do you see Colorado as a trap series at Coors Field? I kind of do, but the Royals are also in a spot where they need to be taking every single game with the same amount of enthusiasm, the same amount of intensity, especially not having a playoff spot right now. If they had a 5-game lead in the wild card race, I would see this as the stereotypical trap series because you just imagine you can walk all over Colorado. I thought the Oakland series was a trap series. I thought the Miami series was a trap series. Hopefully they don't play down to competition, but you could absolutely define this as a trap series. Greg asked, do we have anyone anywhere that can pitch out of the bullpen? You know, it feels like we keep going back and forth with this. Maybe not so much to the back and forth part of it. Maybe it's just back constantly of how bad the bullpen has been. I don't think it is one of the worst bullpens out there. It's not a good one. And, you know, I'll keep defining it in the way that I've defined it for a month or two now. They don't get anybody out via the strikeout. And when you have bases loaded situations, there's second and third and there's one out and you need a strikeout, they're not going to give it to you. They just don't have many swing and miss guys, if any. James MacArthur might be their best option on that front, and even he's not striking out a ton of guys. I'm hopeful that, you know, you asked the question, is there anyone out there? Yeah, there are, and I do believe the Royals are going to add a bullpen arm or two to make a strong push, but right now seems pretty quiet on the trade front there. Not many teams been making moves, and I'd expect the closer we get to the deadline, maybe 1 or 2 weeks leading up to it, is when you could see the Royals strike, assuming they still have a playoff spot or within striking distance. Aiden asked, with the draft coming up, who would you prefer taking, a college bat, if there's still some out there, or would you take someone like Hagen Smith out of Arkansas? I think a college bat, if you got a J.J. Weatherholt to fall to you, if you got a Nick Kurtz to fall to you, I think that would be, you know, a situation you can't pass up or a player you can't pass up. I'm just a little bit uneasy about college pitchers considering the track record the Royals have. Going back to 2018, I mean, Brady Singer's had a good year, but Brady Singer was seen to be the ace when they drafted him. Coar didn't work out. Lynch didn't work out. Still hoping that Chris Bubich can, but to this point, he hasn't lived up to that expectation. Asa Lacy, maybe the most notorious one, but I thought the COVID year right before the draft was tough on him and tough on a lot of guys. You look back at the 2020 draft, pretty much nobody has excelled. It's been an all-time bad draft class. But there are, I think, really, really good talents in the college pitching route. Hagen Smith being one of them, Chase Burns being another. You go a little bit more down the line. There's guys that I think fall in the 10 to 20 range that if the Royals wanted to reach, save some money, I could see. But if Burns and Hagen Smith are there, it'll be tough to pass up as well. I mean, Hagen Smith doesn't turn 21 until a couple months down the road, so he's one of the younger college guys in the draft. I think considering how good Hagen Smith and Chase Burns would be, it'd be tough to pass those guys up because I also don't think J.J. Weatherholt or maybe even Nick Kurtz is going to be there when the Royals are selecting. So I think I'd go more the pitching route there if Hagen Smith and Chase Burns were both accessible to the Royals with the 6th overall pick. Okay, we're going to take our first break of the show. When we come back, still plenty more questions to get into next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson. You can always find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. Want to give a shout out to a few of our sponsors today, and we're going to kick it off with Booking.com. Booking.yeah. With summer travel heating up, especially for baseball games, it's time to explore those U.S. cities that you've always wanted to learn more about. Yes, I'm talking about your rivals cities with hotels, bed and breakfasts, vacation rentals, resorts, and so much more on Booking.com. You might just find your perfect stay even in your baseball rivals city. I'm going to Arlington in a few weeks. I'm going to San Francisco here in a few weeks. I've been bouncing around the majority of this season, and I'm always going to go through Booking.com to find the best hotels, find the best place to stay, because you have some of those hotels that overlook a stadium. Really cool to stay in. But yeah, Booking.com is always going to have you covered. They've had me covered. So be sure to go and check them out, because the right stay can make you a fan of any city, even your rival. Book today on Booking.com, on the site, or on the Booking.com app. We also want to tell you about one of our other sponsors in eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. And eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. Let's jump back into it and get to our next question, which comes from Eli. With the Cubs rapidly dropping in the National League and reports of them wanting to blow the team up, do you think a Cody Bellinger trade where the Cubs eat some money could be possible either now or this offseason? It wouldn't surprise me if the Royals went that route in the offseason. I just don't think they have the resources at this point in time to go after Cody Bellinger in the regular season. I think he is, one of those bats that the Cubs are going to try to sell high on, even if he's having a down year or he's having a down week or a down month. He's still one of those big names that is going to generate some interest and I think costs more than the Royals have to offer. So I wouldn't be shocked if they revisited that in the offseason, but right now I don't see him really being on the Royals' radar. I think I saw a tweet out there that, the Royals were one of the top 10 teams that feel like a good landing spot for Cody Bellinger. I just personally don't see it. I'm going off of what we've heard and where there's been a little bit more smoke on some players who the Royals have scouted, and we haven't really heard anything on the Royals scouting Cody Bellinger. If that changes, then we could have a totally different conversation. But right now, I do consider it to be a little bit unlikely. Next question comes from Jason. I know this is a tired and much repeated question, but why, especially after the disaster in the bullpen last night, are we putting Carlos Hernandez out there while Pennington is dominating in Omaha? I feel like there is something the Royals are viewing in Walter Pennington that they believe it's not going to be as easy as a transition to the big league bullpen. Carlos Hernandez, look, I think he has upside, but he's just not a guy you can continue to run out there, every other night. Last night's a little bit different because Alec Marsh only went 3 innings and the Royals needed some length, and Carlos Hernandez really didn't give it to them. I've never seen a guy throw that hard, throw 100 to 101. He's throwing the fastest pitch this year by a Royal and just have no swing and miss. Walter Pennington has a ton of swing and miss, but it's also in AAA, and I think the Royals not bringing him up are seeing something in him that maybe they feel needs more polishing, that needs to get tuned up a little bit before he gets a chance in the Royals bullpen. It's never as simple as black and white. This guy's not good. This guy's down in the minor leagues. You got to bring him up. I mean, look at Drew Waters, early on in the year, and look at Nick Prado before, and, look at, Nelson Velasquez struggling, MJ Melendez struggling. Of course, Velasquez got demoted, but MJ did not. They have better tabs on the guys in the minor leagues and at the big league level far better than I do, than we all do. They know what these guys can bring and if they're really a good fit. And I don't think the Royals would be just keeping Walter Pennington down because they view Carlos Hernandez as a better option. I think they see something in him that needs to be improved before he gets a chance in a bullpen that's trying to sort itself out and get right for a playoff push. Next question comes from Greg. Would love to see your ranks, or love to see you rank your hopes for Royals first round picks. Other question, any players you'd like to see the Royals sign extensions to, and what would the years and numbers look like? For rankings of the college or the Major League Baseball draft, I was about to say the college players in the draft, I do think it's going to be a college player. I could see them maybe going Connor Griffin, one of the prep bats there that I think is going to go top 10 or top 12. But if I had to rank them, I think I'd put Chase Burns number 1. Then I'd go Hagen Smith. Who's going to be there? I could see Nick Kurtz as well. I'll put him 3 on my list. Maybe because he was hurt for a little bit this year, JJ Weatherholt could fall to the Royals because you just never know what all the teams are thinking out there. But I do think that would be my top 4. Throw Connor Griffin in there as the number 5, but those would be my top options. And then as for extensions, I think I'd like to see the Royals go for Cole Reagans and give him an extension. They're likely wanting to see if he can do this for a full season, not have any hiccups. I do think if they were to go after an extension with Reagans, it would be somewhere in the ballpark of, let's say, 5 to 6 years for a pitcher. I mean, that's always going to be expensive. You're looking in the $20 to $30 million range. If he really dominates the rest of the way, it's going to be closer to $30 million. I do wonder if the Royals are looking to lock him up long term, because he's one of those guys I don't think you want to pitch anywhere else anytime soon. So those are kind of my thoughts on the 2 questions there. Jeff asked, thanks for doing this on a holiday weekend. What do you think should be an acceptable record for this road trip? Assuming Royals don't make a trade before the break, how soon after the break do you expect one to be made? Granted, there's only 2 weeks left. Well, they got the Rockies for 3, St. Louis for 2, and Boston for 3. So 8 games there. I think with the Rockies being involved, I'd like to say, 5-3 would be acceptable. Shooting for 6-2 would be really, really good, because that I think would firmly put you in a playoff spot going into the All-Star break and get that long week off where you can rest up and then maybe try to make a trade when you have that downtime. I would expect a trade to be done maybe a week after the All-Star break. That's just, throwing at a dartboard in the dark. I don't really have too much to that. I just don't think they're going to wait up until the deadline to make a move. And I believe that during the All-Star break, there are going to be some teams that look within and commit to selling. Whereas 2 or 3 weeks ago, that wasn't really possible. But good questions there from Jeff. Joe asks, are there any updates on Jordan Lyles? Nope, nothing that we've heard from. Annie Rogers also got asked this the other day, and she said, haven't heard anything, and the club has asked us just to respect his privacy, so that's what we'll leave it up to in regards to Jordan Lyles. Tom asks, maybe I missed them, but when the hell are we going to finally get Bubic back? I just think they're going to be slow playing it with Chris Bubic. I don't think they're going to rush him back. I think that after the All-Star break, before the end of July, we will see Chris Bubic in the Royals bullpen, because they moved him to the bullpen in Omaha to get some reps out of there, get some more comfort throwing in relief. So I do imagine by the end of July, we are going to see Chris Bubic in Kansas City, but there's just no need to rush him. And I think the Royals are viewing him that way, of kind of slow playing it and making sure that he's all ready to go before he gets called up to Kansas City. What are the top 3 prospects you're hoping the Royals to get in the upcoming draft? This one comes from Gonzo. I'm just going to reiterate what I said for the previous question on the draft. I think I'd say Chase Burns, Hagen Smith, and then I'll go Nick Kurtz. I think those 3. I also love Braden Montgomery. I forgot to add him into that list. I just think Braden Montgomery is going to go top 5 now. I think the latest mock draft had him going to Oakland, so he may not be there. The injury toward the end of the year could have him sliding a little bit. But my top 3, I think, would be Burns, Hagen Smith, and then Braden Montgomery. Okay, let's take our final break of the show. But before we do that, I want to give a shout out to Locked On Sports Today. It's here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. It's streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. When we come back, we'll wrap up our final questions on this Mailbag Friday. Next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned in to Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson. You can always find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. Still have a couple more sponsors to wrap up our show with, starting with Tax Network USA. Here on Locked On Royals, we pride ourselves on getting you the latest for your team, whether it's the offseason, the draft, spring training, or the playoffs. It is year-round. You know what else is year-round? Collection season. Just because tax season is over doesn't mean the IRS will stop coming after you for unfiled taxes. The IRS can garnish your wages, levy your bank accounts, and even seize your property. Don't let the IRS target you. Let the licensed professionals and tax experts at Tax Network USA go to bat for you. With over 14 years of experience and an A+ rating by the Better Business Bureau, Tax Network USA has saved their clients over $1 billion in tax debt. Whether you owe taxes, have complicated matters that require tax planning, or finally hit that parlay this season and need help correctly filing, call 1-800-549-1000 or visit tnusa.com/lockedon. So get set up with Tax Network USA. We also want to tell you a little bit more about our final sponsor today, and that is Ibotta. Now, Ibotta is a free app that lets you earn cash back every time you shop, earn hundreds of items from groceries to beauty supplies, even toys, so you can make sure you're beating inflation no matter what you're purchasing. The average Ibotta user earns $256 per year, and that can cover the cost of an entire shopping trip, that flight you've been eyeing, or the fancy dinner you've been craving. Other apps give you points that don't amount to much. With Ibotta, you earn cash back that you can withdraw from your bank account or to your bank account, PayPal, or gift cards. Simply add offers in the app, upload your receipt, and the money is yours. Right now, Ibotta is offering our listeners $5 for just trying Ibotta by using code LOCKEDONMLB when you register. Just go to the App Store or the Google Play Store and download the free Ibotta app to start earning cash back and use code LOCKEDONMLB. That's IBOTTA in the Google Play or the App Store and use code LOCKEDONMLB. Last couple questions here, and we're going to kick it off here with a YouTube question coming from DJ. I know Drew Waters' experience didn't turn out great, but there's a man named John Raven Omaha that is mashing. He plays all the outfield spots. If Isbell or anyone went on the IL, do you think he could come up? I could see John Rave getting a chance at some point, but it would take an injury, as you just mentioned. Kyle Isbell, Hunter Renfroe, two guys that have had some setbacks this year with injuries. MJ Melendez has been very healthy this year, and the way that he's been hitting of late, I don't see him getting demoted anytime soon. But John Rave's been very good. I could also see maybe a swap of Dairon Blanco and John Rave, depending if Dairon Blanco's speed doesn't really, give the Royals a boost anymore, give them an edge late in the games. I mean, I know early on he was a pinch runner late in games when the Royals were in a lot of one-run outcomes. But it's been a while since you've really seen Dairon Blanco take over a game with his speed. Not saying it's been forever since he's stolen a base, but it just maybe would be a point where the Royals want more of a bat in the lineup. And if John Rave is that guy, he deserves a good opportunity because he's been very good in Omaha this year. But good question there from DJ. This one comes from, where did we leave off here? This one comes from Kimball. If hypothetically the Royals are still in the thick of a wild card race in September, who are the top three go-to arms in that bullpen? Well, hopefully it'd be somebody else that they go through the trade route for. But it's going to be James MacArthur and I think John Schreiber 1 and 2, and then it'd be whoever they would acquire. I don't know who else at this point you can trust in a tight game. Thought it maybe could be Chris Stratton for a little bit, but he's kind of fallen back down. Will Smith, same thing. Angel Serpa in that same boat. So the top three would be MacArthur, Schreiber, and then whoever they go out there and acquire. That would be the most trustworthy guys when it's all said and done, if they, of course, are still in the wild card hunt. This one comes from Spoons with how fast Bobby Witt Jr. is. How is he getting caught stealing at such a high clip? I'm at the point where he should stop stealing until he learns how to steal. For example, Bobby Witt Jr. Blanco around the same total stolen bases, but Bobby Witt Jr. has been caught 9 times compared to twice for Blanco. Well, I mean, he had almost 50 stolen bases last year, so I think he knows how to, steal bags. They're just holding him a little bit better, I think. I don't really believe it's coming down to jumps either. I think pitchers are really doing a good job of the slide step, pitching out sometimes, giving their catchers good pitches to throw on. But yeah, I do think it's problematic. I mean, getting thrown out 9 times is not good. I believe it's like a 70 to 71% success rate at this point in time. That does have to get much better. I think he knows, obviously, how to steal bases. You don't steal nearly 50 bags and just do so off of speed and speed only. You have to be highly intelligent and get the right jump, have the know-how, the IQ in that moment, when to steal, how to slide into the bag. A lot of those factors play into it, but I do believe that he's going to be fine in that department. I think they're just doing a much better job of holding him this year when he's trying to steal second base or third base. Next one comes from RB Carr. Draft is less than 2 weeks away. Who is your crush and who do you expect them to go get? I'd love to see Condon or Weatherholt drop, but expect they will draft Smith, Burns, or Savage. I am going to say that Burns is my draft crush because of how hard he throws. And we've seen Paul Skeens this year, really just take off with Pittsburgh. He's never struggled in the minor leagues, hasn't struggled at the big league level. I could see something like that happening for Chase Burns. And I could also see something like that happening for Hagen Smith as well, because he can run it up 97, 98, 99 as well from the left side. So I do think, one of those two guys would be my crushes, and that's who I expect them to take, assuming they are there, because that's what all the mocks have been telling us there. But that's who I got on my crush list so far. Josh asked if we fall back to 4 to 5 games back of the third wild card with 2 to 3 teams in front of us. Do you think we will stand pat? I'm pretty sure you don't think we would become sellers, even if we got really bad, but wasn't sure if you'd think we'd still be buyers. That's a good question. I think they would still try to go after a bullpen arm. Nothing too crazy, but they would try to get back into the hunt by solidifying that bullpen. And, that's probably the best way to do it and the most affordable way to do it. So if they fell back 4 to 5 games before the deadline, I still think they would make a move. Maybe just not as many moves as they would if they had a wild card spot or they had a 2 or 3 game lead for the final wild card spot, or they were within 3 to 4 games or 5 games of the division. This one comes from RJ. How many All-Stars will the Royals have? I'm going to go 3. I think it'll be Bobby Witt Jr., Salvador Perez, and then Seth Lugo. Brian asked who are the Royals' top 3 trade pieces, or top 3 to 5. So I'm going to say, it'll be probably all the guys in the farm system. I'll go with, I don't think it's going to be Blake Mitchell or Blake Walters or Caden Wallace or Gavin Cross. I don't think they're going to go anybody inside the top 5. Maybe we'll go with Hunter Owen, just being another arm that they are trying to develop. I could see, Carson Roccaforte being one of those guys, though he's not having that good of a year. Maybe there could be some guys that are blocked that you could have minor trades with, Drew Waters being one, Nick Prado, I'll throw in that name. Maybe you could look into trading a Jonathan Bolin because he's blocked. I would look to some of those guys right now that you just feel like they're not going to get their shot in Kansas City, and maybe somebody like Oakland or Colorado or Miami would give them an opportunity, where the Royals right now, considering they are 48 and 41, they are not going to be too keen on the idea of giving those guys opportunities when you are trying to compete for a playoff spot. So those are some names I'll throw out there for now. I'll have a much better list in an episode later on next week. This one comes from Jacobs Field. Do you think the Royals will try to acquire a new bullpen of all the same trade partner or from the same trade partner, or will they acquire one reliever from each of 5 to 6 different teams? That is a good question there. I would wonder what the most drastic trade there has ever been to fixing a bullpen, whether it be 4 or 5 trades to get, new guys in that bullpen, get everybody else. I wonder what the most a team has done at the deadline to replace a struggling bullpen. Last year, Texas was really poor in the relieving aspect of it. And then they got Aroldis Chapman. They added a few more pieces, and they definitely evened things out. And it helped them win a World Series. But if it was to play into the joke here, I think it'd be, 5 to 6 different teams, 5 to 6 different arms. I think that's a good question, though. And lastly, Brad asks, will Seth Lugo be the starting pitcher for the American League and the All-Star game? See, also, I would like to see Bobby Witt Jr., Salvador Perez start as well. Well, yep, Salvi and Bobby, I think, get in, but they're not going to be starting, as that was announced on Wednesday. Seth Lugo, if he looks really good in tomorrow's game, I think he's going to have a really good chance. I put it right now, though, at about 50%, 50 to 55% that he is that starter. I could still see it being Tarek Skubal, and I could see it being Corbin Burns as well. But Seth Lugo absolutely has to be in strong consideration for that. Well, that's going to do it for another edition of a Mailbag Friday and another episode of Locked On Royals in the Locked On Podcast Network. I've been your host, Jack Johnson. One last shout out to Locked On Sports Today. It's here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows that cover every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now, available for free on the Fire TV Channels app. Well, we're going to take Sunday off. We might bring you an episode tomorrow, depending on what my schedule looks like. But, we could find a way to work it in, assuming there's a lot that goes on in the game tonight. Maybe I can save it, though, for Sunday after the All-Star team is announced, the rosters are finalized, and get more of a breakdown on that. So it'll come to you on Saturday, or an episode will come to you on Sunday. But until then, you take it easy, Kansas City.